series on beauty, reflecting on various things. The way tonight came to be actually is interesting. Way back. I sent out an email to a lot of people that I knew something about art, the arts. And I said, who is the greatest artist in Charlotte? And the first reply I got back was Chas Fagan. And I thought, I've never heard of it. But I know him now, and he's here, and he's absolutely amazing, and his work is incredible. A lot of people in Charlotte identify him most quickly as the Captain Jack statue that's down near Central Piedmont. That's a neat thing for the neck deck thing and so on, which is cool. Anyway, Chas, thank you so much for being with us tonight, and for all your work and everything else. And I have just some questions. I'm going to interview him, and he's going to show us some stuff up on the screen, which is cool. And at the end, we'll let y'all ask him some questions, because I find he's somebody that arouses curiosity in me and other people. Because of the amazing stuff that he does. First of all, just tell us a little about yourself. You're originally from?
That's the toughest question of the night, right there. I grew up all over the place, but so part of my childhood was in Brussels, in Belgium, and then back to rural Pennsylvania on a farm, and then to Boston, and then Connecticut for college, and then DC after that, and Philadelphia, and then Charlotte. There we go.
And the most amazing or annoying item on his bio, depending on how you look at these sorts of things, is that Chas is self-taught.
Yes.
One would think you would go and study, but you studied something else, like Russian history or something, is that right?
Soviet studies.
Soviet studies, which is fascinating.
And I was dead serious in that, of course. It was an era when that was what made sense, a patriotic thing to do. But then circumstances completely changed.
Yeah. But history comes into play. Not only do you paint and sculpt historic people, but in your work you actually do research into the background, who they've been, and the times, and all of that, right?
Yeah, that comes with, I am an avowed history nut, and so the chance to do any research, to discover a new story, and to find another story that's ancillary to that story is just endless, and I love it. The only thing that stops me is a deadline when the project is over. Otherwise, I'm going the whole time.
That's amazing. Yeah. And Charlotte's home. You came to Charlotte. How did you come to be here?
My wife, really.
It's a good reason.
Yeah. My wife, Katie, was a high-flying businesswoman. Worked for Johnson & Johnson. We were living in Philadelphia, and we had 2 little kids at the time, and we had an event that happened, and it just made us think, what are we doing here? And her question whether she was on the right track for her for that time period for us as a family. And she decided to stay home with the kids. And with that, we had no reason to stay in Philadelphia. And we visited Charlotte exactly once because her dad had retired here and came to visit. And after that one visit, this is where we wanted to be. And so we came to Charlotte. And it's been a wonderful place for us for 18 years.
We're glad you're here. You live right here in our neighborhood. That's a great thing. So our series is on beauty, and I was with Chas the other day, and I asked him about, what is beauty? And you just rifled through some things that you've done. That's pretty interesting. Show us some of those. Those are landscapes, the cow, and everything. That's great.
Well, beauty is all around us. Can we dim the lights a little bit? Just so you guys can see. I've seen this before. The beauty is all around us, and the summation for it all is what is beauty? It's nature, and it's the life that's infused in it. And so this is classic. You guys probably still see that one. When you think of a beautiful scene, beautiful painting, sunsets, it's actually sunrise up a mountain in Pennsylvania. This is a cold morning in Arizona. But what I want to get to is this. So this is very simple. But what gets me is artists spend years, if not a lifetime, trying to figure out what a perfect abstract composition would be with big, bold shapes. And the way I discovered this one was walking through the fields and taking a left and looking like, huh, that looks pretty good. And it's nature, it's God's creation is what we as artists just attempt to emulate. And that's the definition of beauty. But here you can see these big abstract lines, bold, zigzag through there with triangles and shapes. It's, you don't have to really invent it, you just look. One of my earliest paintings, but I still love it. Very cold morning, I call it Morning Mosaic. Again, bold, big shapes. We're quiet now. And for me, the disparity is that the quiet of a stream bed, one of my favorite places to be, when I don't even fish much. I just love being there. But you have that versus the very strong strokes for the light. And in the end, it's a very energetic piece despite it being so quiet. And here you've got natural shapes with human shapes, so that's man-made forms. And if you put them together and you set them dramatically, the results can be really interesting. The curve of that peel was awesome. Silver, the reflective nature, otherwise you go really bold with white and dark and reflection. And again, here you are with the simple. About that life imagery, this, you've got the pheasants there, that extra little element of movement and animation in a very quiet space. I titled this one The Gossips. And there you go. In terms of character and liveliness, you can get that with a cow. I grew up on a farm, a dairy farm, part of the time and part of the childhood. And so I totally identify with this one. I love it. I love the sense of humor and figuring there's a portrait in itself.
Am I right? These are all things that you saw and you painted them.
Mm-hmm.
So I have two questions about that. One is, so I think part of our premise in our beauty series is to help our people to see. It's in front of them all the time. But to me, what the artist does, what the photographer does, is you see, when you help us see what we might miss. How do you see better?
I think it's that moment of discovery. You just have to remember it. So when you're on that walk through the woods or in the fields, for me it's that moment that something catches you. You may not even know what it is at the time, but it's that moment, if you can get it, remember it. So and oftentimes I end up sketching and drawing and writing down notes as to what it was that I saw to try to recreate that, reinvigorate that same scene with whatever that thought was. It's just being conscious of that discovery moment.
Why so any of those, somebody, you could have taken your phone and snapped a photo. So a photo would do, right? Why a painting of something instead of a photo?
For me, it's that, again, I guess that liveliness. So the extra element of life. The strokes, the color mixes, the juxtaposition of colors, the underpainting, all those things can give extra life to a piece. When it's portraits, as when it becomes more of the magic that you remember as a kid. Let's see if I can find one. So when you enter a room, not in this case, but if you enter a room and you see a painting, you feel the presence of them. When you were a kid, it felt like they were real right there. And then in terms of your that's fine. In terms of being photographed versus painting, this is a painting I did for my dad. This is my great-grandfather. But it was based on a black and white photograph. But my gut was to just make it a little more interesting, a little more lively. And I heard of his sense of humor, so I tucked in the slightest bit of the beginning of an expression, just a little bit.
He's about to laugh.
That is the element for me. It's that moment before. It's the moment just where something's about to happen. So it could be with sculpture or painting, even a landscape. You expect something to happen, someone to walk through. If it's a portrait, you expect they're thinking something and they're about to say something. And you figure if you're, again, put yourself in your childhood magic brain, if you stand there long enough in front of that painting, they might move. And that's that engagement that you get with a painting versus photograph. Photograph, some photographers do capture personality and depth, but it's that ability to slide in all of those expressions into one painting that makes it more interesting to look at. And here in terms of portrait tradition, so here, this is a contemporary man, this is what he looks like. But I painted it very much in the old style. Looks really dark right there, it's not that dark. But, so it's a contemporary person, but what I want to show is the face. Now, what's really great about humans, most humans, except for exceptional ones like Elizabeth Taylor, I think, and a few others, were asymmetrical. And so, if you look right now, there's half of the face can have one expression, the other half can have another expression. And I try to find those and put them in a painting. Because when you walk up to that painting, you see all those different expressions in one, and you're dying to figure out what they're thinking. Well, I think I can do this with Edmund here. If I slide over, you see half his face there. He's a very accomplished, very strong man. Evidence right there. Very much a gentler, about to smile. He's got something to giggle about. You know, that warmth is evident. And you put it all together, and you've got an expression that really is engaging. So, again,
that's amazing. So I want to come back to portraits and sculptures and people in a minute. I want to talk about public art, because I've been thinking about this. We've been doing this, what's beautiful about Charlotte, and it's people, there are a lot of things that are beautiful about Charlotte. Then we notice there's beauty in Charlotte. I've been to cities in the world where they don't have public art. And it's a very different kind of place. So you've done some public art here and in other places. So why does that matter? What does that do for citizenship, for pride of the places? So show us some of what you've done and talk about that.
well, the main thing is to remember that public art, public sculpture was meant to tell a story. And forever, as humans, all we want to do is be able to capture a story and never forget someone, something that's important. Every culture has the same tradition of doing it, from the Egyptians to Western, Eastern cultures to the Native Americans, with the need to record an event in a wampum belt, a series of beads with shapes that hold the story forever. And that is what hopefully can happen with public art. So in Europe, you see these historical sculptures of different individuals, and you now see how far something has come, or what was accomplished in that location. It's kind of a cultural common denominator that you can't forget. And humans through history have been doing that forever. And so that's where I think I fit into the kind of continuum there.
Jim, pull those lights back down, if you don't mind.
But here we have the very familiar. This was Captain Jack when he was still clay. So that's clay, and that's about how big he is. But for Charlotte, the idea here is having the foundational story of Charlotte be represented, and to have people remember, or even learn about it the first time. There's another element that comes with public art, especially sculpture, is that you walk up to it, no matter who you are. You have visitors that love watching this anonymously. You have people coming from out of town, they see Captain Jack, they need to learn the story. And they learn it. Now you can learn it on your phone and tell it you want. And it's not just the clues that the artist has left. But the idea being that it's like a story that gets retold every time it's seen. That's the power of public art, or at least art that has some historical bent to it. Here's another American history piece. This one's in Texas, but it represents the American experiment, the American Revolution. And just like with Captain Jack, where there's a bigger, broader story, the big event of the Mecklenburg Declaration, so the cultural event, It's also a story of one guy. So Captain Jack was just a 40-year-old guy who braved his way up there, holding this document where he could have been killed and one of the lists could have been killed. Same idea here. The individual is a Minuteman. So it's everyone. It's the citizen stepping up. So history can be the singular story, it can be the broader story too. This piece has endless little details, like if you look stuck in the grass, there is a lantern, which is Paul Revere's lantern. There's a bottom there's a corner of a tea crate. And I put in the logo of the East India Trading Company from the Tea Party. The flag is from Bunker Hill. Gives you an idea of scale. And there he is. Finished location.
So several things about it. So there are details there that 99% of the people that look at it never notice. Little lantern. Is that kind of like an artist's joke? Like you kind of enjoy that yourself? Yeah.
Well, I see it as more of the teaching part. If you're willing to discover tons of stuff.
Always. There should be, yeah. How do you, so you capture emotion in something that is just dead out solid. How do you, so you were talking about the painting, what's about to happen. How do you get motion in something that will never move again?
That's the fun of it. And usually you get through those hoops of trying to make motion when you start with a smaller model. And if you can get the smaller model to feel like it's moving, then you go to the next stage larger, and you got to recreate that same illusion again and again. This, you mentioned moving on this one. This one, I wanted that flag to be billowing. The alternative would have been, you get a sheet of bronze and you hammer it and shape it, and it becomes like a rectangle that's now shaped. And I wanted much more than that. I wanted that wind to feel like it's pushing through. And to do that meant serious structure had to go in it. So this is where art and engineering play too. And then I had to come up with a way to make that flag look like it's a soft, thin, billowing flag, where it's actually almost 1.5 feet wide in some places and hollow inside, so that I could snake up steel pipes up through the back of that person there, up into the flag and straight up so it could stand on its own. That flag alone, so it's all illusion. When you look on one side, it looks like it's one sheet. You look on the other side, it looks like it's a sheet, when it's actually seriously wide. There's more bronze on that flag than the two figures that are depicted there. But all in the effort to give movement and life. It's a question of infusing winds and natural movement.
And you're untrained in engineering as well.
For me, it's guts, and then I rely on action engineers.
Yeah.
Who give me the bad things.
So you've got a lot of presidents, and to me, a portrait of a president, it's a different kind of portrait, right? It's a kind of public art. You may have it in your home. I mean, if any of you grew up with this, I did. My grandparents, I remember this well. They had a little, I guess, 8 by 10 photo of Dwight Eisenhower. And when Kennedy became president, they took that down and they put up a picture of John F. Kennedy, right? He's their president. You have Catholics, the Pope. Photo of the Pope is above their door. When that Pope dies, they take it down, they put up the next Pope after the smoke comes up. So why you've painted all the presidents, right? That's amazing. And some you've done more often and in larger projects. Talk about painting presidents. I know you got some backstories on some, but just in general, what's that like? It's the president, right?
Yeah, I'm smiling because what it becomes, at least with the presidents I've had the privilege of meeting, it becomes moments where you have to remind yourself that you're talking to the president. Because it turns out these are pretty normal people doing some amazing things, but they're pretty normal people. And so I just, lots and lots of anecdotes about just how normal they are and how fun they are. This is what comes to mind for me. But again, on the responsibility side, it's my responsibility to record them as they were, accurately, and then hopefully, in some positive manner for whatever was accomplished during their administration. The one I think that you had seen, if I can find it now, is this one. It's a little dark in that one. This one is not seen that often. It's in a fairly private location. It's the school where the two of them went. So this was an occasion where they wanted to record the fact that the two presidents, also father and son, who went to the same school. So the challenge on my part was trying to record them, challenge enough, but also to make it proper. So, goodness, you had W was president at the time, his father was not. So now, how do you possibly position them and keep it diplomatically correct? And somehow still keep the seniority that is obvious. So how does that happen and work diplomatically and correctly? I had to consult with a bunch of people, and the one way to do it was to have the younger President Bush seated in prominence forward a little bit, and have his father stage right, as in secondary to him a little bit, but he's still standing, so he's still above it. So I was able to balance both requirements for the puzzle. And they're there on the wall.
And you sculpted these same two guys, right?
Yes. Yeah. Which I could probably find here. And that was for his, younger Bush's library at SMU. This is where they're in clay. They're about 8 feet tall. And interestingly, the younger Bush wanted to have both statues in his library, knowing the impact that his father had on him. And he was warned about criticism, and he didn't care at all. This was what he wanted to do. And then they are. And they were at the grand opening. I have this photograph coming, which I should probably show you. For me, every sculpture like this has its own life. They take on their own life. So that some of them are touched in a particular way, their hands are held, some of them are hugged, and I love that. I mean, I really do. And I get random strangers will email me photographs that they found or that they come across of this statue with some scene going on. And then things go viral and everyone sees it, which was, you may have seen this one. I thought this was wonderful. I know the caption was, President Clinton hiding among the bushes.
So I thought in that portrait, the painting you did of the two of them, go back to that for a second.
Sure.
When I saw that, I told you I thought their facial expressions are not like one another at all. I said in my sermon this morning that I was putting words in your mouth. When you paint someone's portrait, you don't try to paint them on the day they had a bad head cold, or the day after their mother died, or the day they were really mad at whoever. But what are you trying to capture? Because these two guys look pretty different. Are you trying to capture their best self, their truest self? What are you after them?
Well, most of them I'm after it all. So I want it all represented if I can. The power of a portrait is that you get to show what's behind the eyes, what's inside. And that's true as sculpting and painting. And that's what people gravitate towards. What are they thinking? What's in their head? And so with this one, it was a question of trying to be, have a positive look, and then also have the quiet stance of senior behind, which he's backing him up all the way. I love that idea. And there is an anecdote on this one, though. I had a hard time. I scheduled to meet with them at the White House when we were together, and then schedules, of course, changed. And Bush Sr. couldn't be there at that time. I went anyway, and I got wonderful photographs of him. It was great and perfect, but I just didn't have the father. But I had some backup photos from another time when I was doing Portrait of Mrs. I happened to take pictures of him when I was in Kentucky, so I had a backup. But I couldn't quite, I would have to make up the scenes, how they worked together. So standing together was the proportion of how they really fit together. And I was struggling with this a lot, and it became known. And then, out of the blue, I got an email from Mrs. Barbara Bush. And I knew it cold. And I read it, and it was all seemed pretty positive with an attachment. So I opened that up, and it was a snapshot that she had taken. It was Christmas vacation or something, and the whole family was there. And she knew what my dilemma was. So she had me get dressed up, and in the family quarters of the White House, and come and sit and pose, and she took the picture. So the actual pose I got from her. Thanks.
That's a good story. Could you paint anybody?
Could I?
Yeah, sure. So, I don't know how to ask this. Part of what we're after in our beauty series is seeing beauty, noticing beauty, but also seeing beauty in ourselves, that you are beautiful. And a lot of people, I know people that are great looking people, and if I say you are beautiful, that they'll blush, they'll avert their gaze, they don't believe that about themselves. Like, is there beauty in everybody? Because you just spend a lot of time looking at faces.
Absolutely. You have people are very concerned. It's a thing now, obviously, with cell phones and all these photographs every day. People are concerned how they look. And now it's become part of the portrait thing, too, where people, when they have their portrait done, they want to look a particular way, they have a particular view they want. They're very versed in their own likeness, which I don't know how that's possible. I'm not. But it presents that issue that what I know is that I try to get to know the person and then find that wonderful expression that is so them. Not staged, not a big smile, you don't want to paint a smile. But trying to find the person in there. And I know I can do that. And that's what I always aim for. So it's always trying to find the one that shows the character. And then characters, there's one example, there's a couple. Here's a gentleman you just want to know. And it's a little contrasted here. Another one.
That's a great story.
This gentleman, he's in a train car. So it's a boxcar. Reason for that, the quick version of that is his wife was doing a adolescent age book. So a novel that took place among hobos and boxcars. And she wanted to go and do research on these things. And he, of course, said, not alone. And they were in the 70s, I guess, at the time. And after that experience, which he really enjoyed, and he enjoyed meeting people and getting to know them, he encountered his next chapter, which was cancer, very bad. And he went and conquered it, and when he got out of that, to get himself back, he ended up traveling across the country in boxcars to get his mind back into life. So that was
like we all do.
So that's why that's the portrait. But the quick story for him is a total stranger to me. He called, asked if I'd paint his portrait. I'm a self-employed guy, so the answer was sure. And he wanted me to come to Seattle to his house on a particular day because it was a family reunion. At the family reunion, there were all kinds of people that, if they're not related, when they arrived, there were a lot of 100 or more came into this house. And it turns out these are all people who he had touched. So he had made his fortune as a young man, and instead of just retiring and disappearing to a beach and sending charitable donations anonymously somewhere, whenever he would encounter someone and he'd find their story and find out that they needed something, he would help. And all these people were just the ones who could make it back to visit him. But in particular, I met two women who were surgeons. And when he met them, they were two little girls in the back seat of a broken down car on the mountain. and their parents had just immigrated from Eastern Europe. And he followed them and paid for their education, college, and medical school. And here they were. So that was just, again, well, that's not research, but it's a story that begets a story, begets a story. Incredibly amazing stories of people you encounter.
Where's that in his, I think I can see it, but you talk about it. Where's that in his face?
Well, it's the looking out. So he's always looking out, not to himself. It's just not, and it's not, look at me. It's looking out. That was the aim with him, was not the self-focus, which you can kind of see.
Show that portrait of the Korean flyer.
Absolutely.
This is a great story.
Again, yeah, story of people who are just amazing to meet. So here, in terms of face, you want to see what's behind those eyes. Look at those eyes. Amazing guy. So, 1950, this man here is a pilot and is flying Corsairs out of an aircraft carrier, and he and his wingman and best friend are sent out in formation to go and support over a battle you probably heard of, the Chosin Reservoir. A terrible battle that I recently studied, and it is incredible. So Marines are hyperextended, and the only support they have is from the air, and it was these guys. And he's supporting as best he can. He notices his wingman, though, goes down. And so during the whole battle, he keeps track of where his friend went, and then looks down and flies over at some point to go check him, and he gets a wave, but he notices he's not getting out of the cockpit. And so he makes a decision, right there, to go and land, crash land next to his buddy to try to save him. Which sounds amazing in of itself, but if you see the topography, it was like the Alps with jagged rocks and snow, and he belly landed into that stuff. Only a couple, 100 yards away, got to his friend, who was clamped in there in the fuselage that had bent, and he could not get him out. And he called in reinforcements, and a helicopter, another brave man, deserved Eagle Medal, almost like that, arrived, and they could not get him out. But this was his closest buddy. In the end, they had to leave him. And he thought he was going to get court-martialed. In fact, he was convinced of it and told he was when he was called to the captain's office afterwards, when he got back to the aircraft carrier. And it turns out that it was the opposite, that they really commended him for trying. And in fact, he got the Medal of Honor for what he did. But when I unveiled this portrait, it was a location, and they said that this man would be there in his 90s, and then he would be there with family. And I think the next photo, his best friend was a guy named Jesse Brown. That pilot who went down was Jesse Brown. Jesse Brown, this man, was the very first African-American Navy pilot. And when he was dying there in that plane, he asked his friend to take care of his family. And at that point, there was a little daughter named Pamela, and that daughter is standing there with her. So when family came for that portrait gathering, it was his entire family. Incredible, incredible. And again, I was just a spectator. This was I was just so happy to be able to record this guy's story. But there it is.
Nathan Arlovich has probably shared with some of you, many people I know, this podcast about this priest that does work with immigration around the border. And I love the way this guy talks about it. People say to him, "Oh, you're doing amazing work," and he'll say, "No, I just get a front row seat and see the amazing things that God is doing." And I love that viewpoint. You get a front row seat, you get to try to capture a little bit of it. I'm interested in beautiful lives, because I think they inspire us, they help me to be better. I'm interested in religious lives, because I'm religious, I'm a church guy. But we have saints and heroes in religion, and you've painted and sculpted a bunch of them. Are those different in any way when you have religious people? Or?
Well, it gets back to the same thing of that person inside. So a religious person, starting out, they must be thoughtful, And there's a lot that goes on behind those eyes. And my job is to convey that somehow in the sculpture or painting. So it's, there's this level for people, normal people, and then there's religious people of different levels and notoriety, etc., where we just expect so much more inside there to see. And that's the challenge. So I have had occasion to a few, and I know the one that you mentioned was, which is one I prepared. There we go. This is Howard Thurman, and it's a small stone statue. Believe it or not, that same stone that he's carved out of, even though it looks butter white, is the exact stone from the same quarry the same day as the stone behind it. But this stone was sitting outside the National Cathedral for years, like 100. and then we carved it. Here it is in the National Cathedral in D.C. If you go to the high altar on the right-hand side, there are 3 recessed seats, and above those are the small statues you see right there. So the one on the left is Howard Thurman, the middle is John Donne, and to the right is George Herbert. So it's supposed to be great orators in the English church. And here's Howard Thurman. The thing that caught my attention with him was a particular image of an oak tree. He repeated that over and over through his writings and sermons. And I totally related, a country kid, I had my favorite oak trees. And I know the power of those oak trees and the history of those oak trees and all that it conveys. I loved it. So I really related to his writings. Well, there's one more writing, one more phrase that he used that I totally related to, also with wood, which was you must follow the grain of your own wood. That totally intrigued me. It's kind of like the Shakespeare in Hamlet, should I know itself be true, That I totally associate with, so there you go. At the back, where no one will ever see it because he's high up there, 12 feet up, the back of his robes are actually oak tree trunk. But again, no one will see that.
I love when Chas and I talked about this. I read somebody years back was talking about a lot of the art that's in Gothic cathedrals, how some of it is up so high you can't see details. Some of it's in the attics, some of it like this backs up to something. And what this writer said is that we tend to think, oh shoot, you can't see it, I have to get up there and take photos. And this writer said, the sculptor did it for God, and God sees it. It was for the glory of God. Oh, that show us Mother Teresa. Yeah, sure. You have 2 actually, but yeah.
This was a painting just a couple years ago of Mother Teresa, which ended up being reproduced there for her canonization, so that she became a saint. For that ceremony, the tradition is to have a tapestry hanging from St. Peter's, and it was based on that painting.
And you were there for her canonization.
Oh yeah, these are my phone shots. That was my seat.
It's going to be, you seem to me to be a very humble person, even though you're brilliant and so on. That had to be just an astonishing experience to be there at the Vatican, Mother Teresa, someone from our lifetimes being canonized. One, being there would be amazing. But then you're there, and the painting that you were asked to do of her is there. What did that feel like?
All right. I mean, you can imagine it's completely surreal. I did not expect it. It wasn't planned. It happened. But the memory I have from those entire days was being able to spend time with the missionaries of charity. So the sisters in Mother Teresa's order, and obviously incredible women who do incredible work every single day all over the world. But there was a common denominator that just like I noticed it once, I noticed it twice, and then every single one I met, it was there, which was one, brilliance. So very intelligent people, but the other thing was humor. Incredible humor. That sometimes quiet, sometimes deadpan, but no matter what, there was humor all the time. And that really hit me. I was thinking, I think of Mother Teresa's, somber image, and then but they said, there's more to this. You must see. And I saw it. It was incredible. So that's the thing I walked away with, was how she was much more of a complex figure than we can ever imagine.
And the women like that I've ever met, they smoke a lot, as did Mother Teresa. So this painting captures this joyful side of her. You sculpted her, though, and that's a different look for Mother Teresa.
Well, I don't know if I have that one. I'm going to find it. The one I sculpted was for the National Cathedral, and it was the classic Mother Teresa image. And it's in stone and relatively small, about 14 inches tall or something. But yeah, so that was I had done that years before. And in fact, some of the sisters did not know that I had done that one before. And they were talking about a likeness that they had seen before that they didn't really like that much because it was so serious. And the question is, so which one was that? And they confessed. But it was great. But so it showed the more severe, somber, serious, get the job done, Mother Teresa. That's depicted in stone. My goal there was stone, as you probably saw, it reflected light. And so in order to make deeper shadows that can then be seen in lighter stone, you've got to make them deeper and darker and more dramatic. So my clay model was pretty dramatic. And it's that those photographs were circulated among the sisters around the world, and apparently wasn't like very much.
Oh, that's amazing. And you did Pope John Paul II.
Yes.
Other popes or just that? Is that the way?
Pope John Paul, but I had the privilege of doing him twice.
Yeah.
So this is clay, and he's about 6.5 feet tall there. And wind, I mentioned wind before, we put a little wind in his vestments there, a little energy. You can see my model up front with that wind element. And there's a story behind the crate, which we will not get into, but the Pope was lost for 72 straight hours by a well-known shipping company. And it took my wife, Katie, to track it down on her cell phone by becoming friends with every person in the distribution network of the company. We found it because it had to be under there. It was installed, and the very next day, Pope Francis was arriving in D.C. to have lunch next to the statue. So it had to be in. There was no shoving the deadline back there. So my wife saved the day by far.
And where is that?
It's a shrine to him, so it's
the Catholic huge.
Right next to it, yes.
Yeah.
And this is the second one, but also with that same movement and life in it. There you go. That's the shrine right there in D.C. And that's actually my favorite shot. It's from behind, but you can see the movement. And what you don't know when we went into this was that, when you think of a road flowing, and there's lots of photographs which I was able to see of the Pope with these wonderful flowing roads, it's great. And I thought, I can do that. But then reality hits, because you know that they're visitors and children, et cetera, and they're going to be moving and running around this thing. And so how do you make the vestments lively without having portions of them sticking out too far that might catch someone as they go by? Because bronze is not forgiving. I can vouch for that. So this took some design so that every angle looks like movement, but it's actually a fairly tight, almost conical shape.
What would something like that weigh?
He's about 12 feet, so maybe 1,600 pounds, something like that.
Wow. You did Rosa Parks?
Yes.
Okay, so it's African American History Month, and some of us did a Deep South pilgrimage to Montgomery and such. So, there she is. And Methodist, by the way.
And this is the National Cathedral. So she's, what you can't see is a green photo, but Right across from her, a matching head, is the Mother Teresa. So she is at the base. This is what they're being carved. There it is. So if you look at these columns, in the blurry part there, that is Rosa Parks. And there, which you can really see, is Mother Teresa. The interesting thing for me, though, is that those stones had already been there, just blocks of stone. They were there for 100 years before I did the model and I handed it off to the stone carvers who carved my model, but out of that meat of stone. So there was no, you couldn't flex or make, like the Rosa Parks wearing a hat, always in the image. What do? So I had to kind of alter the shape of her head a little bit, just to make it fit in that stone, because there's a limit to that.
You're working on Healing Cell?
Yes, and I don't think I can show that one, but that's another one coming up. Elie Wiesel, I'm familiar with. A wonderful figure and a great face to sculpt.
I got a glimpse of this the other. Did you have to shoot me since you showed me that? I got a glimpse of this the other day, and I said this interesting. We had this interesting exchange about it. I said he looks younger. The question is, at what age is someone to be depicted in a portrait in a sculpture? How do you settle on that?
Well, it's just, again, telling the story. So Elie Wiesel became world known beyond his initial book when he was a young man. After Auschwitz, was the Nobel Peace Prize. And that happened, in the 80s. And so trying to capture him roughly at that time period was the goal. So a recognizable face based on all the publicity at that time. That was the goal.
Were you with him? Have you been with him, or are you working with photos?
No, she's deceased. And so no. And all I have are photos, but I did have, when I did sketches of this, I sent them off to the Cathedral, and then they kindly sent me back copies of the responses from his family, which was wonderful. So,
he was in Charlotte several times, and I told Chas they had an event at the Duke Mansion, and somehow at this lunch I was seated next to Elie Wiesel. So first I thought, oh great, and then I thought, what do I talk about? Like, hey, I enjoyed reading Night. A great person. You're working on Billy Graham. Great interest in Charlatans, of course.
Yes.
As a sculpture for...
It will be in the Statuary Hall collection in Cathedral.
Wow.
So it'll be roughly 7.5 feet tall or so. On the base, it's all prescribed as to what you can and cannot do with Statuary Hall. But he's upcoming.
How old is he in that sculpture?
That was a big debate. You think of Billy Graham, and when you turn that big corner, it was from a young man through about 40. He didn't really change much at all. And then you drift into the 70s where fashion comes into play, and then a little less recognizable. So there was a big window to play with, and I did. So he's very young looking. He's tall, thin guy as he always was. So it's that prime period is what we settle on. And right now he's only about 2 feet tall, and he's not very well defined yet. And soon he'll come to life.
That's your process. You start with a small model, and then same with the painting, or painting you start big.
Oh no, with paintings, depending on if they're complicated, where it's very hard to explain what something's going to look like. I often do a small sketch, even though it's not really like a tight painting if I can. So there's small little paintings, versions of the much larger piece. And if I'm lucky, I get to keep those. It's always hard to send a painting or a sculpture away. It's like an emotional moment. So I get to keep them.
And the last one I'll ask you about, I've always been obsessed and intrigued by Lyndon Baines Johnson. Lisa and I are actually doing some research next week. We're going to the hill country of Texas, to his birthplace. It'll be fun. You come with us anyway. So you're doing LBJ.
Also, right.
That's got to be. So I thought about that. How this is a somebody always in motion, angry, joyful, ridicule, everything, every mood imaginable.
Yep.
Long wavelength, that would do. What's he gonna be like?
Hopefully that dynamic. That will be the challenge. So as I mentioned, I love putting every expression in there. And so far, he's a model. So he's finished as a model. So he's 2 feet tall. And I'm now taking measurements off of that to make him 8 feet tall. So within a month or so, I'll have his head, and I'll be working on that at a larger scale at home. And we'll see how that goes. But the plan so far, based on the model, is you get to see all the wonderful character lines that he had, especially his eyes. I love it. And in fact, these things happen organically, so you do it, you work, and then if the details come out, you just let it go. You move on, because your accidental thumb stroke or something worked. In the 2-foot figure, the head is only this big, 3 inches or so. So, trying to get an eyelid or something, just the lightest little stroke. And when you can lay it in, and it's okay, you leave. And I did that for him, and I was so happy. And then only right at the very end, before people were coming to see it, that I realized that I hadn't even really done his eyes much at all. It was just nice and shadowy in there. And I loved it. So very hard to go back in there and carefully try to place some eyes, even though he left that gesture just right for the small scale. But, so he will be coming.
Do you ever lose, so there's something that to you is important to include in a painting or in a sculpture, but the donor, the person who's asked for it, gets uncomfortable with it. You wind up losing something that you think is really precious.
Oh yeah, that happens a bit. It's just, again, the storytelling. The most memorable, because it was kind of so visible, was the first statue of Reagan I did, which is in Rotunda in DC. And as a student of Soviet history, was what I lived, and I already had pieces of the Berlin Wall from another project, and so
you got that up there, don't you?
I don't know. Maybe able to. I have the current one, not that one. Okay. I have it. Here we go. This one. There he is in the Rotunda. There he is. What I wanted was to have in that hand, so in President Reagan, it was out in public, he wasn't quite at attention, but almost, and his hand was almost closed, just not quite. And my goal was to be able to, when the whole thing was finished, slice off some fingers, slip in a piece of the Berlin Wall into his grip, and then close it up and weld it up again, and no one would ever know. So he would be there at attention, but he'd have a piece of the wall in his hand. And at first, that went very well. And Mrs. Reagan thought it was great. And then as time went by, suddenly, maybe that's too aggressive, maybe that's too much of a negative message, and all kinds of things like that. But I'm stubborn too. And so, with the background, I really wanted something. So what I did was, the base. If you look at the base there, there's a layer right there. So there's a top piece, and then there's a bottom piece, and in between there's a layer of crushed Berlin Wall pieces. And yay! But actually now, the good and the bad, either I win or I lose, and I lose now, is because the statue, they have stanchions around it with velvet rope so that you can't get too close to it. Because people have discovered the Berlin Wall pieces and they all want to touch it and pull it off, which personally I think is great. But the architects of the Cathedral did not. So.
Do you have any favorites that you'd show us that we haven't looked at?
Well,
that is just special to you?
They're
all special to you.
That's the big part. I wish I could remember who said this, but I remember seeing an interview with an old artist, and I don't even know who it was, what he was doing, anything. It was just a TV interview, and when asked, "What's your favorite piece?" And he was a very old man. His response was, with a smile, "My next one." I love that. There are a couple for sure. We'll talk about the Reagans. I just saw a photo of Nancy. There's something about beauty where beauty the sense of beauty changes, as in fashion. So I was asked to do this sculpture of the two of them, and everything's wonderful, and I'm excited, and I get a box from FedEx, and it's a huge box. There's a mannequin in it with a dress, and I'm thinking this is, well, bad because it's in the studio, what's it doing here? But the good part is that I get to, I can do A and B, I can look at the dress, and I can sculpt it in clay. Great, that's what I do. But then came the phone calls from the committee. "You'll love this, we love it, it was great, great, great. Can you just make a few changes?" Okay. And then they started speaking a language I know nothing about, because I'm, a guy, and I know nothing about this fashion. And it was, well, the shoulder pads. Can you just reduce the shoulder pads a little bit? I had no idea what they were talking about. The 80s, shoulder pads were, I guess. Can you tailor the jacket so it's more fitting? Okay. Can you trim the skirts so it's, again, also more fitting, more universally pleasing? So basically altering this entire dress. But now the big kicker is this dress, when I opened it up, it wasn't just any dress. It was Nancy Reagan's red dress. So I was being asked to alter her dress. I was just like walking into fire, willingly. And so, anyway, the result was this. And then, fortunately, they didn't tell me the other half of the story, which was that Mrs. Reagan did not know that she was being sculpted too. So when she arrived here, at the end of the hall, this is at the library, turned the corner to look, she was expecting to see Ronnie, but she saw the two of them. And her reaction was a little odd, and she froze, and then her head dropped. And I didn't know what that meant. And all I could do was walk closer to find out, and she was crying, so I figured that was okay. And it turns out she was just totally surprised, she had no idea. But so I dodged it, but there you go. There's another anecdote on this one. The engineers you mentioned before. And early on, the engineers said, you can't have two figures. This is California. If you have two statues next to each other, earthquake will happen, they'll crash against each other, and they'll destroy each other. And it can't be done. Well, that's my assignment. What are we going to do? And so I came back with the idea, well, what if instead of two figures with two individual legs, what if it's one unit with four legs? And the engineers love that. And so his hand is in the middle of her lower back, and it's flush against her back. So it's sculpted all together and cast all together, so it's all one piece. And you can imagine when I told Mrs. Reagan that story, she loved it. So that's definitely a favorite. And mentioned other saints, Joan of Arc, absolute favorite. This one was just for me. I have two daughters, very strong women. So I love the idea of doing something like that. And I also had the privilege of doing Neil Armstrong a couple times. There. An incredible man. Again, there he is. Genuine guy who helped me with, he pulled photographs out of his family album to send me. And I only found out because I noticed a little black adhesive in the corners. So it's that, that level of just amazing guy. But the neat part is that, in terms of design, where he's looking is often the direction where he went. This is him as a student, 55, prior obviously to NASA. And that's what happens every day. This kid is walking in his footsteps, which is the whole idea.
Did you make those?
Yes. And in fact, when I presented this idea at Purdue, they liked it, and then they asked me how I was going to do it. And so there's that famous photograph, you can kind of all see it in your heads, with the moon boot on an angle, you can see the sandy surface. I would just sculpt it and carve it, and it would be done. And then there was silence. So I thought, oh no, this is not going to work. And they looked at me and said, well, why wouldn't you just take the mold off of Neil's boots? I mean, mortals don't know that that's possible, but it's very possible. And so they arranged for me to go to this place, a secret location, to actually take that mold off of his boot. And so the mold is what was used to cut the stone. Sorry. I thought I forgot this. When I mentioned that statues take on a life of their own, they were there. People line up for photographs of them at every graduation, etc. Apparently, and I've seen the photos, but this one caught me because, young Neil is living a home life. There is, if we have time, one story locally, which is this one. These two guys stand on the Greenway, so by Wilshire Creek. It's off Kings Drive next to the Culinary Arts Building, CPCC. They're down by the stream on a rock. And these two men are Thomas Spratt and King Hagler of the Catawbas. And their friendship is what allowed settlement to happen here. They're about 30 years different, but it's a father-son thing, truly bonded men. And Spratt, for example, paid rent to the Catawbas for his land. He totally, this is a mutual relationship that stuck so strongly that 20 years after this, when the revolution happened, Hagler is long gone. They ended up, the Catawbas ended up siding with their neighbors against the British Empire, which wasn't necessarily a logical chess move, but they did it. And it's because of this long relationship. And the stories that get you were the King Hagler one day brought an orphan boy to Thomas Spratt and told him to raise him as his own. So he did, took him in and raised him as his own son. Now jump forward a couple generations and you're the grandson of Thomas Spratt, you're working the same fields, and this old man comes out of the woods. Native American old man who wants to come home and be buried next to his father. And that old man was a little boy named Peter Harris, who was the Catawba kid. And what's amazing there, this is where the history nut goes, is that this Peter Harris kid had grown up, fought in the Revolutionary War, became famous in the Revolutionary War. After the war, became even more famous because of his writings to the legislature to get his pension, and his description of the situation of the Catawbas, the condition, the dedication to their neighbors, etc., was just incredible. So wonderful words, he's known for that. And then also, unbelievably, he traveled to England after the revolution as a show, basically, and returned. So this is a guy who had just the most amazing broad life, but all of it started with this initial friendship of these two men. And there they are. The amazing thing too is if you go to the Spratt's family burial plot, you can see Thomas Spratt's stone, beautiful stone, with his inscription. I was curious, his epitaph is just amazing. But right next to his stone is the stone of Peter Harris, his adopted Native American kid. And it describes Peter Harris as the well-known revolutionary, etc., who came home to be buried next to his father. It's so touching, it's unbelievable.
I get this feeling you love what you do.
Absolutely, a chance to learn more in every single day.
And to teach.
Yes, well, even if it's quiet. So I normally don't have nights like this on a regular basis. Just my kids are kind of bored. But hopefully the pieces do that teaching. If you leave enough clues in the paintings, in the sculptures, there's something for people to learn. And I enjoy it so much that I just want to share it.
If there weren't commissions, if that weren't a thing,
of time. But the things that intrigue me the most, as you noticed, are the action before the action. And I love great stories. So I grew up loving Homer and the characters within. And then that branched into all Greek and Roman mythology, et cetera, with every kid. I loved it. And for right now, I'm playing with, the two concepts I want to play with. One's Native American, because I've always loved that since I was a kid too, the whole little story. But the one that intrigued me now that I hope to have a chance to play with is Icarus. And so I know the story of Icarus, and I've seen sculptures of Icarus, and you see all those, and he's fallen. So various forms of fallen. And I never liked that much. I like the adventure of Icarus. I like the idea of those wings. I like the idea of taking the big leap and not knowing. I like all that. And so what I'm hoping to do someday is to sculpt him as that young man, young grown-up boy, at an edge. So maybe a sculpture that you can park on the edge of a tall shelf or something, or a tall column, but have him at the edge, leg dangling, with his wings kind of curled around him a little bit, but actual wings, where he's stroking a feather. So he's often thought stroking a feather, you can see him just trying to build up that courage to make that leap. And that would be it. So that it's thinking that moment before being more powerful than the falling, crashing event itself.
So it's so odd that you mentioned Homer, because when you were talking about, when you were describing the thing about right before something happens, my mind, oddly, went to the Iliad and Andromache. So Homer narrates this when Andromache is about to learn that Hector has died. But Homer narrates that at length, the feeling that she had in anticipation. And of course, when the news comes, the grief. So I thought about that saying, that's a cool, depressing.
But it's the, if you know broadly the story, then you know what's going to happen. So you get to experience it like the character. So that's the energy.
What questions do you have for Chas? Don't go on at length, just a question. Yes?
How did you get from Soviet studies to China?
She said, how do you get from Soviet studies to this?
Yes.
Through the Soviet Union. After graduating from college, I actually went and studied in Leningrad, at Leningrad State University. And my fairly brief time there, and experiencing life as it was for every average Soviet at the time, I came back 25 pounds lighter and wanted nothing more to do with Russia, and I was done. But the one thing I had done through college was I cartoons, so political cartoons or editorial, topical news cartoons for the New England Ministry. And here's the kicker, is that they paid me. And I remember that part. And so in trying to think of survival, I thought I could just put ink on paper and someone might pay me enough so I could pay rent. And that's how it started. I ended up doing everything I could to survive, with every line in the water I could imagine, from illustrations, magazine covers, prints, everything, and then eventually landscapes, portraits, and sculpture came later by accident.
Do you do anything now besides painting and sculpture? That's enough, but...
Yeah, I'm asked occasionally to do some fun little things, which I do, little pen and ink things and things like that. Otherwise, if I had more time, I like to write. Not for anyone, but for me, maybe. I don't know.
Bet you're a good writer. What else? John?
You mentioned on the sculptures, you mentioned a sense of motion. The Captain Jack on horseback approach from that corner seems like the viewer has just missed him, that he's going on by. Can you speak to that, or because placement has a lot to do with that?
Oh, sure. And then also the eventual reality has something to do with that too. In theory, so the narrative is that Captain Jack is just going north. He's galloping north. So I have him turning to eventually be turning north. So I wanted motion like that. The other part was that the hope was to have the view into the city so that you would be seen in profile as you're going into the city. So all those things played into it. The other part is the eventuality I did not expect. The original plan was that that entire peninsula that includes the Captain Jack and the fountain, etc., was supposed to be open, viewable on all sides, so that when you're sitting at that intersection, you see it on every angle. And so that was the concept, so that you see him turning north, but you have the advantage for being parked there, parked in one angle or the other, you get to see across. The eventuality is that the trees that were supposed to be cut down were not cut down, and then in fact they planted more. And so it's not quite the dynamic that was the original design. And in terms of motion, engineers helped with that one. He's pitched very much, and that's thousands of pounds of bronze on an angle. The fun part there was trying to snake up, again, big steel pipes into the structure so that the engineers would be happy. The result was that I ended up blowing up his, for lack of the accurate term, his ankles. I made them thicker to be able to stick pipes through them so that he could lean. The fun part was I found a book written by the man who taught Rotunda, and he was talking about sculpting horses. And he said, if you want to make a horse seem really strong, all you need to do is beef up his ankles. But beef up his ankles. And sure enough, that meant I had a green light historically to go ahead and do what I needed to do. And then it looked okay.
I think about beefed up a horse's ankles, it wouldn't look so good. Who else? Yes?
Did you study with the F1 artist? Did you just inspired by any particular artist?
So I never studied with anyone. Art was always a personal thing for me. My biggest instructors over time are musicians in general. I was that kid who always got too close to the paintings to see how it was done. But there are a few artists that I really, really love and always have. And it's the Wyeth family, NC Wyeth in particular, because of my influence as a kid and reading the books. And, you can't help that. But his energy and liveliness and his painterly manner is so good. I love his work. And then sculpting-wise, I always aim for American. Having grown up abroad, I really feel that pull toward the need for American art. American Renaissance is great, and David Chester French, he wasn't as free with energy as I would hope, but his figures and his memorials and his kind of power of his figures speak very well. I love his work. So if you don't know, he's the guy who did the Lincoln Memorial. Very powerful stuff.
What else? Ben?
For a 12-foot sculpture or a presidential portrait, what is your investment?
And then, I purposely don't know. I don't want to know. If I concentrate on that, I would probably get depressed. It takes quite a bit of time. The good news is, on a big sculpture, you do have the stages to go through. So there are incremental bites that you can take on and do and finish. So from the design, the concept, the research, you get that done. You get the paintings done, a better drawing done. You get through that, and then you do the model. And that's a whole other life of its own, and you get that done. And now, for example, the LBJ I'm doing right now, it's coming right up. I'm eager to get out there and start picking up pounds of warm clay and slapping it up there and making it happen. Because it has to get resculpted at the next level again. So it's these incremental leaps. But I'm grateful that there are like that, because if it were one continuous thing, I think I don't know if I'd make it. So it's a lot of time.
Where did you do your work?
Most of my work, well, the manageable size work happens at home. So I have a studio dedicated for that. I can do paintings there, obviously I do. I'm doing a sculpture of Flight 93, so 9/11, and it involves 5 figures. And so I had, at one point I had 5 heads, 5 sets of hands, 5 sets of feet in my studio, all over the floor, everywhere. Sculpting as much as I could there. And then I took those to the foundry, which is in Seagrove, the same foundry I use for 99% of all my work. Wonderful group, they're like family, and I get to actually hang out with a lot. And I married those to a figure in foam and then sculpted on top of that, get going. So it's there, but the larger work I work at the foundry so that the finished sculptures don't have to travel. It's clay, it never dries, it's oil-based, so I can just jump in and leave it. I can be at the foundry for a few days in the week and come back 2 weeks later and still be able to move clay easily. That's the great part. The bad part is it never dries, so you don't want to move it. So it gets molded right there.
What happens to your 24-inch models that you're having completed the metal work?
So they all get used. I need them while I'm sculpting, so they're there the whole time. But then when I'm done with the larger sculpture, oftentimes if it's a large entity or a committee or a city or whatever it is, they may want copies of that original model, and so those are cast. And those are great for me because that means I might, get a copy to have with me, so they're really gone. But they're still 2 feet tall. Full figure casting is expensive. So they tend to live a little bit longer.
Is inspiration a thing? So like theologically, you might think, we've read all this stuff about God and beauty, and that God uses beauty to draw attention to God himself, and that God inspires even artists who aren't necessarily prayerful or trying to be holy. Is there such a thing as inspiration, or is it just skill?
I think there's a lot of, I see it as things that I can't control, that just happen as long as you let them happen. So it's I think some scientists talk about the aha moments, if you let your mind go, let it all ruminate, things happen. And you have to, it's a moment of recognition, so you recognize the discovery, you make a note of it. That same thing is what you gotta build and wait for. You set the circumstances up for it, but it doesn't always happen. And in my world, there's a lot of deadlines, and where you can't just sit and wait for inspiration. You gotta plod forward and make sure you can let it happen. Hope that it'll come that day. And if not, you make sure you don't make any big mistakes, and you keep moving to the next day. So I see it as something that I have to nurture, wait for, and then be totally grateful when it happens.
Retha?
Do you work on different projects at the same time sometimes? I mean, if you do hit a roadblock?
And the answer is emphatically, absolutely. I'm told when people walk in and see a big sculpture, oh, you must be so patient. I'm not at all patient. Especially when I want to see the progress, I want to see the progress. And when I'm slow, it's my fault. It's terrible. But for that reason, I end up doing a lot of different things at the same time. So, right now there are 2 easels going, and then and 2 sculptures going, and then the LBJ for the foundry. So always something, and I can always shift gears. And if it's not that, there's something I start thinking about the next one, or a competition that requires some thought. So there's always something, fortunately, to distract myself.
Yes.
Did you do anything unique for the Berlin Reagan, like a piece of the wall?
Yes, I did. So he was asking about the Berlin Reagan, and what he's referring to is in November, I had the privilege of unveiling a statue there in Berlin of President Reagan. So this was a last minute thing, but it was for the anniversary of the wall. And the speech, obviously, is what he was famous for. And there it is in clay. He's 7 feet tall. And what he's holding in his hands is a stack of speech cards. And the Reagan Foundation in the archives sent me facsimiles of those exact speech cards with the text on it and his notes on it, his inflection notes, and where you can see where he wants to pause. It's amazing to read, especially trying to read through his eye. Very cool. So I knew I wanted him to be carrying that. And the obvious thing is to do this, which you might be able to see. I took the pertinent texts and carved it in there. Mr. Gorchak took it out. But here's the fun part. Here he is. Here he is in bronze. That's on the terrace of the U.S. Embassy that's right next to the Brandenburg Gate, of the multi-view coming out. There you go. So the bronze you see beyond is the sculpture that's on top of the Brandenburg Gate. What I want to get here we go. If you walk behind the statue and look at that same stack of cards that you saw at the front, I gave them a little more mass, it's a little more hollow inside the bronze, and slipped in an entire wedge of the Berlin Wall. So it is the Berlin Wall speech.
Where did you get all those from?
I'm gonna have to find that one. My iPad just decided to go to sleep now. Well, the quick answer, which I can't show you yet, once it warms up again, is I had done some small portraits for C-SPAN, and they became known of all the presidents, and this man had purchased the remainder of all the wall, and he had it in storage in Florida and Maine. And his goal was, over time, he set up this foundation, so it still happens, and over time, we would distribute these pieces of the wall somewhere, so they wouldn't be forgotten. The same concept of political art, of historical sculpture and public sculpture. And in my case, I got a phone call asking if I would do, let's see if I can find it. There you go, maybe. I got a phone call asking if I would do a sculpture, which I might be able to find quickly, but maybe not, of President Reagan, or actually it was supposed to be a painting of President Reagan. Goodness. Could be here. I'm not seeing. There we go. Fine. They wanted a painting on this chunk of Berlin Wall. And I thought, now that really steps into the realm of the German people who were painting off the wall. And I didn't really like that idea. Because, I wasn't living through that. It's not me. And so I offered up, what if we did this bas-relief profile of it instead? Which was this. They agreed, and then this huge truck comes to the house. We're living in Philadelphia at the time. There's a pallet in that truck, and they unloaded on my driveway. And it's a big chunk of a Berlin Wall. And I had to drag it with friends, scratching the driveway, into the garage. What are you going to do with that? And so now it was in my garage, and I had to do this. And I thought I would just be able to carve it. And Berlin Wall, as you can imagine, is not the best of construction. And very powdery because of what was in there. I was wearing a mask all the time. But I ended up carving that rough circle. And so what started out as a large block ended up this rough circle, and with a lot of pieces extra.
How big is that?
It's probably only about 4 feet. But this hangs inside the USS Reagan aircraft carrier. So this is in the tribute room of the aircraft carrier.
If you fly into Reagan Airport in Washington, you see Reagan's statue out there, and that's what Chas did, which is cool. Anybody else? Question?
I have 3 kids, so pay the daughters and my son. But only painted them when they were really young. So, possibly a year old. So they're in their mom's arms, and they're small. I love them, they're little gems. Not that the kids are little Jens anymore. I got my 15-year-old youngest boy cringe at that concept. But this is the only ones I've done. Initially, they tease me from their whole lives that they can't imagine. Oh, Dad, you can't draw this. But now they kind of like the idea, so maybe we just say, now, if you're adults.
Some of you will know my mother-in-law, who took up sculpting at a fairly advanced age. And I just thought, this is just, I could pole vault more easily than I could sculpt anyway. And so she did our daughters. And so the first one she had built, my older daughter Sarah told you this. And we unveiled it, we looked, and I was shocked because it looked like Sarah. Although, at the time, Sarah was about 20, and we agreed, this looks like what Sarah will look like when she's 40. But you said that's the thing.
Oh yeah, no, that's a very easy thing to fall into. But you can't help it. You're recording detail and structure and kind of landscape of the face. But with a youthful face, there's a lot of elasticity and stuff that you don't have there. But when you're trying to record that in clay, if you cover all that up, then you're covering it all up, you know. But if you leave it, you get to see the recognizable features. So you end up, in painting too, the same thing happens with artists painting themselves, sculpting themselves. They always look older, but it's what happens. It's the natural way to do it. So sculpting and painting children is very hard. It's one thing to do your own kids, because that's kind of easy. You can see them in your head. But if it's someone else's child, it's very difficult, because you don't have that same memory of their movement, of the personality, everything in there. And with a child, you really need that, because you can't just rely on what become more visible landscape features on the face.
It's amazing. Yes.
You describe all too well the discomfort that you go through when you're creating art. My question is, how do you know you're finished?
I know, you're hitting me through the heart right there, because there's the answer. The answer came here, the deadline. But it's always the case. All the artists I've talked to, when you read about it, the same thing. You just can't stop. And you have to know when to stop. It's just like writing. You can keep editing and editing, and you end up with something that's totally different from when you started, and not necessarily better. And that is the issue of trying to know and recognize that you need to stop. So with landscapes and still lifes, I've built in a method of painting fast, where I do an underpainting that I really like, but I do it fast. And then sometimes that underpainting reveals something new that you didn't even know was there, or just an accident. And then you go to the next stage, and you give yourself just that next day, or standing, or sitting, whatever you want to call it. Next time in front of the easel, to do the next stage, and walk away. Because all the kind of interplay of what you did fast initially, and what you play with on top, really works well. It's when you start going in, it's, this could be a little better, and this could be a little better, you're just covering it up, and you're softening things that shouldn't be softened, and edges that might be really dramatic are not, and you start losing it. My problem is I know that I'm doing that, and I can recognize that I'm doing it, and I still can't stop. So I have to set these strict rules. You must stop. So, anyway.
That's how I do sermons. I do it fast, and then it's Sunday morning. And you get what it is. One more. Yeah, Bill.
I'm just fascinated by the fact that you haven't followed the traditional path in becoming an artist or a sculptor, and you just created yourself. Has there been one moment or one circumstance or one setting in which you were able to say to yourself, I want to do this, or I have a gift, or this is something that I can make a career out of, or did it just happen?
There are a couple. The first one was when I was like 10 years old. There was an elderly friend or actually a mother of friends of my parents who were living in Belgium. She was Hungarian, and she was a portrait artist. And I have no idea how, but she just decided that I was an artist. And she told me so. And she was about 80-something at the time. And she was adamant, and I will never forget, because she was visiting for 2 weeks, and during those 2 weeks, I would have to go to their house with the drawing that she had told me to draw the night before. So I would have assignments to bring to her. She would pull out a face from the National Geographic, hand it to me and say, draw this and see me tomorrow. So just this 2-week period where she just said, you must, you must, you must. And then after that, it was, I would hear from her, I'd get letters from her, and I could still see that finger saying, are you drawing? You must be drawing. And so that's one that just stuck in the back of my head. The other one was obviously the cartoon you heard, just trying to do something different. And I took that path and ended up doing cartoons and being syndicated and having a blast. So nationally syndicated, I didn't have a paper, I just had a deadline, but that gave me freedom to do other things too. So I was playing in all these worlds of just fun. But the one moment where it was truly the big decision, oh my gosh, what have I done, was I had done a magazine illustration of Alexis de Tocqueville. So a historical figure, and it was an assignment, and I did it, and it was kind of cartoony, and that was that. And I forgot about it until a phone call from C-SPAN, and they were trying to do an entire year-long program, taking a bus, through retracing his route across America. Alexis de Tocqueville in the 1830s, he wrote Democracy in America, talk about this big, tremendous observation of American culture. And I didn't know that at the time. And they needed some visual. So I went and I pitched, because they knew me as a cartoonist, but I knew I could do more. So I pitched as a portrait painter, and I could do this image of him that they could use on TV, they could route buses with and everything. And I got the job for about 3 days. And then they called back and said, you gotta come back to DC and pitch again. And there'll be other artists who come on this time. And so suddenly I was behind where I was before. But I went in again and I thought, I could do it because I did it before. I had all the same props, I brought in all the same portraits, and this is all new people, and the crowd was dead. I mean, silence in the room, the whole way through my presentation, not a peep. And this is before digital, so it was just putting stuff on the table, and the last little thing I did was a drawing of Tocqueville, just another drawing of his face. And to finish it off, instead of just having just a neck or something, I just did a quick little bust and made it like a sculpted bust. And put that on the table, and they went nuts. They went crazy, happy, oh, this is it, perfect. And so then I'm up and I'm out, I'm in this room, I'm signing that paper, and then this paper, and then I'm out on the street. And I had to call Katie at home and say, well, good news is, I got the gig. Bad news is, it's a sculpture. She knew what I knew, which was that I hadn't touched clay since the 3rd grade. But that was the big, just, this is it, gotta do it. And so that was my first sculpture. So yes, so if you think of a moment, that was the moment.
So the self-trained thing is really impressive, although I do have to, I wonder how they would work in other fields, like the law. I am grateful that the guy that did my foot surgery was not self-trained. Anyway, y'all join me in thanking Chas.